Okay, there we are. Hi, Jedediah John Hartley,
Hi.
Robert Gerard Michael Hartley, father, buddy, best buddy, uh, everything you want to be wrapped up in our friendship.
Yeah.
So uh, for all those that are listening, we're having a discussion, and it's a heart discussion, and it's also a wisdom discussion on just life and really the views that we have, you know, through our own journeys, through our own research, have ended up where we're at today. Doesn't mean that's going to be forever. So I have a great interest in hearing my son, and my son is been a screenwriter. He wrote an awesome book about his father. It was very insightful, called "I Hope It's Not Hereditary." So he's writing a second book called "Oh No, It Is." But he is a great communicator, great heart, great noble wisdom man. At this point in his life, he's doing his master's, but looking for his PhD in environmental philosophies. So this is very interesting from my point of view. Is that when he was born, his mother had some complications just for the first 6-7 years of having children, and then it was hard. So we thought we'd miscarried a few times, but then I had a dream, and it was a dream about having a daughter, and she would be bigger. She'd need a bigger field than the field I had, which was this cleaning business. And what she has stepped into LA, and she's running an awesome company, and it's a bigger field, and it's called the Good Trade. So she's got, a million subscribers or more, and it's just really has an awesome message for people. So, and Jed and I just went on this journey where I had this dream that he would, same thing, he'd be a different type of thinker than I would be, and he would see a different world, and it'd be kind of a David and Solomon picture from a biblical perspective, where David fought wars, and David had his head down and tried to battle to gain territory, and then Solomon was the wisdom one that stopped and asked questions, of God and of life, and he wrote 3,000 proverbs, many songs, and he led one of the greatest kingdoms there's ever been. And so I'd had this dream about Jed building a blue city, and it was a city that had the distinctives of abundant life, and it was well organized, and so that really is not through my control or direction, but something that's really in him to see cities that prosper the people, that they have nice or wonderful distinctives to it, that it's environmentally beautiful and well, just managed, etc. So what we talked about doing here today, and it's named a father and son talk about their different viewpoints with the left and the right, but it's a bigger discussion. It's a worldview. It's a place where I came up, and that's where I'm going to share a little of my journey, which leads me to where I'm at, and then Jedediah is going to share his, so that you can all get a better picture from where we're coming from. So I was brought up as a Catholic boy, and it was kind of severe, and so I found myself in my life in a home where there was a lot of love, but there was a lot of guilt about the mistakes we would make. And I was brought up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood. Now I have to start with my dad's history. My dad was brought up on Ogons Avenue, which is really a well-known street in Philadelphia for Irish and Italian Catholics. And my dad's dad was murdered, and his wife was his mother, worked 2 shifts, so she was gone much of the time. She worked in a dress factory. So Mary Londrigan was her name, very Irish. But she had my father and her were living with 6 uncles. And uncles were very prejudiced through, ignorance, honestly. I'd say lack of knowledge. And so they taught my dad, they called him Jackie, never be around a black person, never be around a man of color, never be around. So my dad at 18 went to he was drafted, and he was a pacifist, and he came out of his draft place, and he was at that point, he passed out. So Kevin's behind me, and I was thinking he was telling me to hurry up, but so
yeah, he passed out because he was getting his blood drawn, right?
Yeah, got his blood drawn. Every time he got his blood drawn, he passed out. Strong man.
Tough guy, but can't do blood.
They can't do blood. It just weirded him out. So, but when he came awake, there was a black man of color, helping him, and he was terrified. And then he realized he's helping me. Something started to shift. My dad had a tender, beautiful heart. So then he goes to war, and in war he's a machine gunner because he was a very good shot, and so they placed him in that role, which that was so conflictual. So a lot of times he tried to spray the bullets over the people's heads, and he just couldn't get himself to take another life. But he found he was disoriented, and they had come up on him because they always want to take the machine gunner out, and he was going to be done, curtains, but 2 Polish brothers, and he had come from a lineage, his family, that not only made Polish jokes, but really believed Polish people were dumb and beyond that. And he felt one brother on one of his shoes and another brother on the other, and in the snow, they were risking their lives. They're pulling him back a foot at a time. And so his mindset started to shift. And then he just developed a relationship. I could go into a number of stories with some men of color that he really fell in love with. And they were as funny as could be, like one would take his rifle, and they'd line up their rifles behind him, and they'd say, "Present arms." And this other man of color would grab his rifle because he hadn't cleaned his. Everybody said, "Why aren't you cleaning yours?" And present it. My dad can't say, "Hey, he's presenting mine." He said, but at the same time, he talked about my dad, how much the man stood up for him, because my dad got double polio, and they were pushing him in the war still, and they weren't really taking seriously his symptoms. And so this man would, my dad wasn't able to get out of bed, and so they're upset with my dad. And this man of color said, "He's sick, sir," however they respond. "It's very sick, sir, very sick, sir." And they told him to be still and all that. And finally, they went and checked on him, and he had the 2 worst kinds of polio. And so he went to a ward where 50% of the men died, but that brother would have him come in and do push-ups and set-ups and fight for his life. And so when he came out, he became an inner city principal, and his desire was that people from every color, creed, they'd be valued. And so he was a tremendous example for me as a young man. And he just valued people, he valued God, valued the next generation. He wanted to see them get a chance, especially those that were that didn't have the same opportunities that we had. And he valued prayer. He was a man that prayed, and he valued cities and nations. He was very involved in our community. Had a group called Community One, and it brought in a diversity of people, and they meet in Loose Park, let the balloons go, and it was just very accepting, and there was good things and things that weren't so good that came out of that. But the overall value was awesome. And I just got to grow up in that kind of an environment. And so I set off on my own journey at about 15 years old. My mom was bedridden, and it was tough to be around. And so I ended up living, in a rough area of town, and I ended up just on my own journey where I tried to keep my value system, try to keep my morality, but I had a little boy drowned in an interstate pool, and that just kind of set me over the edge because of the lawsuit and just what I saw from human beings over money. And so I, at that point, just, Kevin's got us, we just turned that sound. Yeah. So, but it was nice interruption, Kevin. So I started to get angry, and it was at life. And I started to get angry at God. And so I just couldn't rectify some of the things that I was experiencing, in the inner city and just with my own life, and it wasn't the way it was meant to be. But I had an experience in my Chicago hotel room, and in that experience, I encountered the Lord, and it was this, my perspective, the severe, distant God, the God that didn't see and care, altogether changed, and I felt like I could hold his hands, and he was right there, and that he was feeling more for me than I was feeling for myself. I felt sorry for him, like, gosh, and I just kept hearing him say, I was there and I cared. And there was many times I just didn't turn towards that care. And so I gave my whole life to him at that point because, it's like David said, Samuel, all of my life made sense according to his goodness. And the events of the earth just became much more extensive to me, and the different realms of life and more of a 1,000-year view. And so it was very different. I came back to my wrestling buddies, and I just came back as a gentle man, as a kind man. That had not been my nature, and I just been as loving. And so they would abuse me, and and I called me a Jesus freak and that things, and I just loved them all the more. And so that really, what that led me into, as I just speak of my worldview presently, is a value for God that I didn't have. That just about, like you wrote in the book about me with the pontoon boat. The pontoon boat for my father was a gift that somebody gave him. And my father had just tough life. He had to work a couple of jobs, and, just had from the polio effects and my mom being bedridden. So we just wanted to get him this pontoon boat, and finally got it. This lawyer friend got it, and then he tried to take off on the pontoon boat. He was so excited, like a little kid, that he didn't untie it from the dock, pulled the dock out, ripped the top of the pontoon boat off. And it was the first time I saw him drop his head. And as we headed back up to the house, I just jumped in the water and tried to put back the dock, the seawall. And about 45 minutes after that, I felt somebody looking at me from a rock above the pond or the dock and the seawall. And I looked up. I've never seen such pleasure, such delight. It was my father. And just, it was more important to him than getting the pontoon boat, that his son cared about his heart. And so the same thing happened when I gave myself to the Lord, is that I just really would have a lot of dreams about just getting the care for his heart. And so I just set my journey and life journey towards waking up every morning, and not out of duty, but saying, what blesses you? What would make your heart happy? And so my value for God went up extensively, and my just sense of his friendship, sense of delight in the day. I mean, I just felt delectable feelings. I'd want to take dates. I'd go in the city and I'd, have popcorn and look at the city and talk to it about it. I write in poems, and it just became very real for me. And it led me into perceived divine communications, where I heard, and I knew I was hearing his heart. And it's not like I had all knowledge, but it just would be about situations that I would have an opinion about, and it'd be always a higher, better, kinder, more loving, and even more humorous way. And I couldn't believe God had a sense of humor. So the value for God just exploded, and my search of him, Christianity is one thing, church is one thing, but my search of him, and I didn't search him out as the one who said, hey, everybody else is wrong, but just as the way shower, and the truth, the way, and the life. And so after that, I was led into a greater value for people. Although my dad had a great value for people, it really shifted, and I would call it the best humanly love I could muster. And then, because I wanted to love people, but I found myself irritated, too easy at people, and devaluating them. And it just really made me sad, And whether you think they earned it or not, their intrinsic worth. So I had this experience where I was leading the youth in Kansas City. I became the leader of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I had a more seasoned man, 20 years older, John Wimber, say, hey, Hartley, how are the youth doing in Kansas City? I had about 300 teenagers, 500 young adults. And I said, the communist infiltrators, they want to ruin my life. I said, so I went on, and I was being funny, I thought. But he was looking out the window. I had a place right over the ocean, 40 feet high off the water, and he's looking out there, and he looked back at me with this beautiful distant look. He's sitting a long ways out. He said, hey, they're beautiful. And it was like he didn't even hear me. I was sitting there. Yeah. So that night I had a dream that was more than a dream, where there was an angel writing in script, and it wrote, then I was telling your mom, I said, hey, do you see this, honey? And I said, this angel's writing, oh, the beauty and the value and the dignity of a human being. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of melted right into me. It was written in cursive. And then second, it said, if you speak kindly to people. It said it was better than that. If you can't speak kindly, then, speak kindly and gently to people. And then the third one is, if you can't help them, don't hurt them. And I cried for a long time. So the value for people, and it was people, I had pictures of an elderly woman that I met later. Now, this wasn't that experience, but that had been treated like a cipher nothing. And then I had a picture of a young man who I ended up meeting, and others that had been devalued. And that really stamped my heart with value in people, human beings. And then the next was the value of the next generation. And that was the John Shore, who that just would always say, Hartley, they're the greatest. They're not generation X, Y, Z. They're generation hope. You have hope in them, that I would not, something shifted where my critical analysis turned into appreciative viewing, that I give people a break before I told them what I saw what was wrong with them, because I found a lot of times it was an irritation and not important. But I started to see young people and what they were going to become. I felt like I could see 5, 7, 10 years out, and not to define them, because that's up to them, but to discover. And so I really gave my life to development of young men and women, and just to know that the world's, where it seemed like there was corruptive systems, I'll call it the enemy's ability to deceive wasn't greater than God's ability to lead. and care. And so I just had a lot of hope for people in all situations. And then the value of prayer that I just, saw when my Aunt May prayed, and she prayed for me when I was on drugs, and I'm staying at her house, and she's 82, and she's the only one that would take me in. And I'd hide underneath the bushes because she'd be swinging on the porch swing, and she'd just say, Bobby's going to be a great man. And, just having a conversation with Jesus and the Lord. And then, just seeing other people that prayed, like I dreamed about 3 grandmas in Cuba and ended up meeting them and how they had prayed for just people to be cared for, and just the value of prayer, where I started in prayer in this way, asking God questions and hopeful questions. I think prayer has been used as a weapon a lot of times to destroy my enemies. But I say, God, how much do you love this person or this group? How much do you love our nation? How much do you? And I felt like that appreciative approach was something that changed in me. I'd been brought up in critical analysis, and I was over the Supreme Court in my university. I'd been real well in academics and did real well playing chess. My dad was a master in chess. So logic and syllogisms were, it was kind of half my brain. The logic side was really alive, but the other half, which was more emotion and creativity, and was not as alive. So the prayer became to me where I'd ask questions: how much do you love them versus how are you bugged by them? Have you ever had a bad thought about, a nation? And I just found, like even in the scripture where he would speak strongly about, like Ephraim, he said, I got a gripe with you, Ephraim. And he said, but you're my beloved son. And I just, found one of the best mentors I ran into would say, be very strong with me, my wrestling coaches, but they love me, And so the value of prayer was something that turned into a conversation, and I just feel like I was sitting on the porch swing, and I just love to ask him his perspective. And then I'd write down what I felt like he was answering. And a lot of times there are thoughts beyond mine. And then I'd pray out of it that, you're going to do a good work, and this painful experience is going to turn out for good, and I'm not going to get bitter. I'm going to get better. And, it's not the end of the story. It gave me a longer term view. I'll just give you one example. My little brother and I, when my dad died, a man called me on the way and said, your little brother and you're going to have a conflict. And I said, I think it's going to last 10 years, And we had been so close. And I just went to prayer, because when I got there, my little brother didn't want to turn off the machine my dad was alive on, but my dad was just alive on a machine and had really asked to be turned off from the machine. And it ended up where we went before the governor at the ethics board in Missouri, and I took a stand against my little brother because the rest of the family wanted to turn off the machines. My dad had actually come awake out of a coma and said, let me go, take care of your mother. It was very powerful. So I think my little brother's the best man in the world. I just think it was a time he was in a lot of pain, and I was. And
that's that's a hard situation to be in. There's no right answers there.
It was there's no right answers, but 10 years later, I have that heart attack or whatever. My heart closes down. Who brings me in, takes care of me, but my little brother. And it was just so much love. And it was 10 years almost to the day. So I just saw the value of prayer, to leave things before God. And then the value of cities and nations. That's what really captured me in my life towards God, is that I didn't have the capacity before that to really love cities and nations. I was really more about, I had been a feature writer in my college and then on a bigger level, and I just kind of would oppose things. versus try to get like you more of a philosophical view or understanding of why is the city in this shape, and how can we really appreciate it and value it and right some wrongs. And so I started to just have a feeling that I'm not going to name a city according to what I read in the bad news. A lot of times it's bad news.
Yeah.
Acts 18, it talks about in the scripture where they all would congregate and get addicted on the bad news, and it's good news, hope news. So I would ask, well, Lord, what's your name for Cleveland? It's not the mistake by the lake, but caring Cleveland. And I end up in Cleveland with the mayor, and I think it opens doors. And that I went before a lot of leaders, and they, if somebody cared and and would listen. So I just didn't find them all evil and all about their own agendas. And there were ones that were confused and mad and bitter, and but I had this value for cities and nations that they could really, that even what I found out, that was my original experience. Okay. And like the United States was the good Samaritan nation to me, that we'd really be a giving, benevolent nation. And that doesn't mean there wouldn't be wrong, but that we kind of have that foundation. So that's where I spent a lot of hours in prayer, and I talked to God a lot, because my job in the church, and I'll get done here pretty quick, was 6 hours a day in prayer. And that gives you a lot of time just to ponder on things that, like Isaiah 60 verse 6 through 66, it was all about the redeeming of cities, and it was beautiful. And so, but I did get into a church setting where there were positive things, but also it was kind of an exclusive atmosphere. It was kind of a superior attitude, and it was, and I was part of it. I was the Green Beret. I was a wrestler. I was going to sacrifice, go to Africa. All my friends died there for the cause and all that. And I started to get more of a perspective in Africa, because all the friends were axed to death, of a level of evil that I perceived, that I started to react to. Went to South Africa after that, and apartheid, and different places. I had to really watch over my heart to, stay in love and not see us in them, And that was kind of the cloistered community that, built big walls. And I quit being a pastor after about 9 years, and I felt like I was in utter ruin in the midst of the congregation, because I'd been taught how to love a community, and I was supposed to love more as a Christian, but I was finding myself more angry with other people and other people groups. And so I went from that appreciative learning to critical, but in some situations, and I would just add what happened with my core values after that is that I, ran a business, and I got affected for really good, because we did some wonderful things in janitorial company and just loving people and being with people. And then after that, I had people that had stolen and things. And so I found myself just fighting again. I got into a position in the last 10 years where I was more reacting to negative things that were going on, and I had gotten kind of a large platform in the church, and so people were taking shots at me, and some deserve, but I just didn't find that loyalty and affection, like even on my wrestling team. I didn't find that belief, like I didn't have anybody ask me a question,
Yeah.
Hartley, why did you do that dumb thing or something? And so, and then, I think that I was not as sensitive to your mom, and just the ability for her to be a woman and understand, what to do. I just kind of got overwhelmed by life and my physical challenges, but never let go of just the idea of a world that had, and cities that had 9 distinctives, and families, and the family system being beautiful, and so it's been a journey to kind of get detoxed of some of the church world that didn't seem to be as mature. And I don't think from that people were evil, but they were overwhelmed and they were feeling fearful and drawn back. And I think that's a dangerous place, because then you'll believe others are the enemy. And I'm not saying everywhere, I mean, I love people, but I had to go outside the walls, I think, to just start to, really my question, and this is where I'm at, I'll just finish now, is just, again, what's Jesus' view and the kingdom of God view? Because, I look at there's 25 distinctives about the kingdom of God, and also the nature of life, that I was taught that life was to be miserable and you die, that it's kind of, the world, system is not good. And I found that there's so much hope, and it was just, you kind of get blinded to things that there was that we're given life abundantly, and a way to celebrate this life and enjoy this life. And it's a major attribute in who God is and the kingdom is to be. But I think through the ages, religion's done that, become like the barnyard mule, the long face and then the hard rules. And so I'm just finding a lot more care and love, and I'm finding a lot more growth, I feel like, out there. And I'm feeling very open, like, to where you're at, what you're learning in life, and the growth, and I feel like I have been myopic, and that at the same time I purpose to, give myself to learning and listening, really listening and learning to, like for the news right now, it seems like, and I just finished with this, that you can't get a good discussion like I hope we will have, where it's what's the common ground, what's the way to grow together, or what is not the common ground, and how do we see it, so that if I've been blinded in areas, I can be open up to it, and that we can have a heart-to-heart discussion where it doesn't have to be what I've seen. It's just talking at each other and over each other. So that to me is not productive. So I'm honored to be with you and to be able to do this together and discuss.
Yeah, likewise.
And I just see you. You're brilliant, and you're.
Thanks.
I just remember you reading books, 10 years ago, where, man, you read more books in a year than I had in my life. So I just, your search and your heart is really special to me. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Whole life story in 30 minutes is pretty good.
I was hoping for 15, but
yeah, well,
30 is decent.
That was probably too ambitious anyway.
Yes, that's
the 15.
Yes.
Well, that's great. Should I jump in and give a little background on me then?
I absolutely. I didn't talk about us as a family a lot, but that's been a lot of my forming and shaping. But we'll get into that. But
for sure.
Your point, you to be able to independently, just where I talked about my family, right. You can. So sure, I'd love to.
Yeah, well, obviously, growing up, I grew up with sort of a pastor's kid, more minister's kid, and grew up inside the church, and had 3 sisters, one of 4 kids, 3 sisters, which honestly, I feel like if there's one thing that has shaped my worldview and just the way that I act the most is probably the three sisters I have and the mom and dad that I have as well. And just the way that we were brought up and we were taught to care for individuals. And like you've talked about, the beauty and worth of the human being and everything like that. But it was funny. Mom sent me a picture. She was going through some old photo books, and she sent a picture of me. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Well, oh no.
Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah.
I have that one right over there on my.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So there's just little Jet, and then I zoomed in. This you might not be able to see.
Oh, what is existence? That is awesome. I didn't see that one, but I do have the one where you're.
I just it felt like a good indication of, even as like a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old or however old I was in that picture, there was just that at least the look of deep contemplation, and
it was there. It was there.
yeah. And that's, I feel like what has defined a lot of my personality and my upbringing, kind of what has directed my, whether it's career or just interests and stuff, is a lot of curiosity and or confusion just about the things of the world, asking a lot of questions. Like I remember I was 12 or 13 growing up. So this was at TDA, so I must have been a little bit older, but going to Christian school and small Christian school. And I remember I was talking with my science teacher, and I was so confused about, because we were taught, the earth was around 6,000 years old. And I was so confused, not because of like dinosaurs or radiocarbon dating or anything like that, because that didn't make any sense to me. But in class, we had also learned that there were stars that were hundreds of thousands of light years away. And I was really confused how the light from the stars, how we were able to see stars that were 100,000 light years away when it had only been 6,000 years that the earth had been in the, it was like, how did it get that? And I remember being a very frustrating kid to have in class, because I'm sure plenty of people have good answers for those questions, but
special effects,
that's what it is. It's a giant TV screen. Well, could be. We'll start our own false religion at the end of this.
Truman Show times a million.
Yeah, I mean that could make sense. But
go ahead.
No, but anyway, so grew up asking a lot of questions, and got to travel with you. I think that was a defining moment too, is because of you as a minister. We went to Australia, went to New Zealand, went with Mom to India when I was really young, and to Zimbabwe, and just different places. And I think that's been very foundational too, because it is very easy to when you live in, whether it's the United States or the Midwest or wherever, or any, if you don't have the privilege like I did to see different cultures or interact, you can lose, or it's something that's it's hard to conceptualize until you've gone and like living in India and being like, this is so much different than the world I grew up in, like no traffic laws and everybody going around and the cows in the middle of the road and stuff like that, and learning how to really appreciate and understand different cultural different cultures and different cultural perspectives.
I'd just say this, you stated an extended amount of time too, where sometimes people go for 10 days. No, you immersed yourself in the culture. You were there a couple of years, or in India, and so
well, and I remember that was always a thing too with us. We would go to places like New Zealand, and you'd be like, all right, let's we got a conference coming up and focusing on it, and I would just be trying to eke out as much of, let's go see as much as we can.
That's right.
And
you and me in New York.
yeah, yeah,
You're taking it in.
yeah.
I'm running down the street bugging people.
Yeah, that was. So we have many of those good times where, and I do think that was a very foundational thing. And so, so when I was, got out of high school, went to college, went to YWAM, which Youth with a Mission. A lot of people probably in your circle will know what that is, but just missions program. Idea is to preach the gospel to every nation in the world and stuff. So I went there, and that was a really foundational time for me, because it was started in Hawaii, and then we did our outreaches to India, and so I was in India for like 6 months, I think it was, and lived there. And I was way up north in India, in a place called Dharamsala, which a lot of Buddhist monks. It was kind of intersection where you had a lot of Hindu, you had some Muslim people, you had some Tibetans, Pakistanis, and Indians, of course, and then you had a lot of Western people who were coming over because the Dalai Lama, when China took over Tibet, the Dalai Lama had to flee Tibet, and so Dharamsala was like the place that he went there. So there was a bunch of monasteries, extremely beautiful town, and I remember just walking around with monkeys running everywhere and Buddhist monks walking by. But I was teaching English to the Buddhist monks, and so basically what it would do is I would have like a class where I'd teach English for a couple hours. And they spoke a little English, but it was a little broken. But then afterwards, I invited them. We had this little cafe that we were also helping run, and I would invite them over, and then we would just talk about religion to some of the Buddhists. Again, it wasn't just the Buddhist monks; it was some Hindus, and but just be able to speak to them about, witness to them about the gospel, and very quickly on. And I feel like this is an experience that a lot of people, especially younger individuals, feel and can identify. Is you go to a place and you're there to share the gospel and preach to these people, and then you start hearing from them and you're like, well, they know way more than me about just life in general. And I do think that was a very foundational moment. I remember there was a moment too when I was teaching. So I'm up in front of the class, and there's about 7 or 8 Buddhist monks who are sitting on the floor facing me, and there was this little beetle that was on the ground, and this Buddhist monk got a little piece of his paper and like slid it underneath and kind of folded it nicely up, like the beetle inside it, and he handed it to me because the window was right behind me. And I was talking and I was engaged and I was just, not thinking. And so I started to crumple up the page with the beetle inside of it. And all of them were like, no. Because of course in Buddhism, like all life is sacred. And so even the little, the little beetle is appreciated and stuff. And so I remember being like kind of embarrassed, and then so I unfolded it and like let the beetle fly. Unfortunately, it was okay and everything. Yeah, I was so scared. I was gonna open it up and be like, I've done, oh no. But yeah, and then it flew out the window, and I don't know why that image really stuck with me, but I just really appreciated like the Buddhist conception of suffering and how there's suffering throughout a lot of life, and like the beauty in trying to alleviate that suffering and trying to do your best, not just your own suffering, but the suffering of whether it's other human beings or animals or whatnot. And this is, I don't want to get too deep into like my philosophical conception of the world, but because I'm just giving a background. But that was a very big.
I love that.
And I definitely think that there's like overlap with Christianity, like the beauty of all of life is something that you see through scripture a lot. But I think that interacting with these monks, I it definitely, I was learning new things about just the way that they saw the world, the way that they saw peace. And not that everything is perfect in the way that like the Tibetan Buddhists, I don't want to romanticize that too much, but just that they had a lot to offer, you know. And so anyway, so that was when I was about 19 or so. And then from then, I think that I've always leaned a little bit more politically liberal in just my intuitions of, and this is something that I imagine that we can develop as we talk. But just there was definitely times where I felt like the community that I was raised in, more specifically like the church that I was raised in, had some blind spots when it came to specifically the way that minorities and people of color, women, and people with different gender and sexual orientations were treated, and felt as if that felt like like there was part of me that felt like, well, Christians should love everyone, and it doesn't make sense, and I don't want to
no, it's good, man.
misrepresent a lot of Christianity, because I do think that that's but it just felt like the way that it was treated. Like growing up in Kansas City, there was a lot of stuff about even the way that the developments around Kansas City. I had no idea how much there had just been a lot of prejudice within the city, and so there was a lot of poverty. Like if you know the city of Kansas City, and it's like no east of Troost, you know that there's like, it's predominantly black black people that make up that community, and it's very impoverished. And just knowing what the history was that led to those things happening, which again, I won't get into all of that right now.
I think it's good for people to know, though, you were a part of a ministry for a long time called Freedom Fire.
I was just
So you lived there. I mean, in the sense that you were there continually, and you did Bible studies for, people that were they're poor, and you were committed, and so you got to see firsthand realities, So
and just engaging with like the poor community in Kansas City, I think really started to push me in a different, direction than like the ideological framework that I had like grown up with. But so right now, just to say where I'm at, I was at UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City, living in Kansas City, working with this organization, Freedom Fire, for a long time. And during that time, started really questioning my faith, questioning my politics, and started reading a lot of philosophy, a lot of good Christian philosophers. There's some existential philosophers who asked, some just really poignant questions about the nature of faith, the nature of, what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to believe in God? What does it mean to believe like in Jesus specifically? And then other questions of like, how do we, more political questions of like, who are the most vulnerable amongst us in our society? What should a government or a society be built around protecting, and who ought to be protected? And so this led to me.
Tell the truth. You're a Christian philosopher. You're studying Rocky. And
studying Rocky,
Dr. Seuss.
Those prime philosophers, Rocky, Dr. Seuss, the good ones.
You learn a lot.
Mary Poppins, the school.
That's it, man.
No, a lot of Danish philosophers that are hard to pronounce their name is more.
C.S. Lewis. Did you ever give C.S. Lewis a shot?
Yeah, I read some C.S. Lewis. I actually read a lot of C.S. Lewis when I was younger. The primary people that I was reading, so there's a philosopher named Soren Kierkegaard that I read a lot of his work, and that was pretty foundational for me. And then that led into there's a French philosopher named Albert Camus that I've read as well, and those two helped me in my quest for kind of like what is my ideology.
Can you ask people about 15 to 30 minutes? Thanks, Cruz. Okay, go ahead. I had a meeting, but we're going to put it back a little bit.
Oh yeah, no worries. And yeah. But so now I've landed on a place where I would consider myself spiritually an agnostic, and what that means is because what that means to me is that I feel like there's a lot of big questions out there about the nature of the universe, like how is there a God? There are big questions like that. That I find are very difficult to answer convincingly for me. I appreciate a lot of people having spiritual convictions about having answers that I don't necessarily agree with, but or that I don't hold to myself. But I think that there are a lot of very difficult questions, and I also I feel like a lot of what that involves is sort of being foundationally appreciative of a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different religions, believe that a lot of people are trying to get at some similar things, which, a lot of people I grew up with, and certainly the community that I was a part of would probably be a little bit perturbed to hear some more universalistic or humanitarian sort of conceptions. But I've definitely consider myself an agnostic when it comes to religion, and politically lean very heavily to the left. Believe, am pro LGBTQ. I'm very supportive of environmental, concerns. Think that we need to really address environmental concerns. Think that there's a lot of problems with systemic racism that we need to, or overt and systemic racism that we need to address in the United States. So a lot of these things are very different than I think the community that I was raised in. But at the heart of it, I still believe that it comes from a place of really wanting to appreciate the beauty and worth of human beings, and to fight for the good in every human being, to fight for this world being a place where all people are loved and respected. And you were talking, I think that one of the things that I've really appreciated with you and I's dialogue is this sense that, I think that when you get in these large macro ideological viewpoints, whether it's left or right, or whether it's, Christian or agnostic or atheist or Buddhist, when you take these big pictures, a lot of times I think it is very easy to lose sight of the beauty and the worth of the human being, especially within communities that you don't identify with. So, and I think that that's a universal problem, where it gets really easy, where if you're on the left and you grow up in a community that primarily values this sort of thinking, and you may be right in some of those thinkings, you may be wrong in some of them, but I think it's very easy too where you can lose grasp on, you just see Midwestern Christians as one thing. And inversely, I feel like I've been in places where I've grown up in very Midwestern Christian Bible Belt worlds, and you just view the left as, the LA, the gay man in LA, you can just view in this very specific light and lose sight of beauty and worth of the human being. So, or
how Antifa is perceived, or
right,
how Portland, how it's perceived, and, so it's a gotcha culture. It feels like a little too often. So I get what you're saying. I just,
Yeah.
for those who want to learn and grow, I hope I'm one of those that just,
Yeah.
there'll be some dialogues that, and that's one thing, and I'll quit interrupting you, but just I'm finding some places that, communication, like David Allshaw, who I grew up with in the inner city. We had a ministry down there at 31st and Truth. Mainly he did, but
Yeah.
he was a social justice, and a lot of the Catholic brothers and sisters, their social justice arm is, there's a lot of compassion. There's a lot of, so I'm just finding those that I think, whether it's from the 1500s or now, that just seem to have, I said to Amy Ann, I said, I don't want to have a reactionary spirit. Yeah. And she said, well, maybe it's time that we react. And I think we just misunderstood each other, because I'm saying, that I just don't want to see cause and effect. I want to see beyond it to understand really it's complicated at times. Yeah. And I want to get more of a fresh understanding, behold, it's a new thing. And I think a lot of the old ways, and that's what concerns me a little bit about, like the 60s, and then it went from peaceful to violent, and some of those ways just might work in the short term, but don't long term, So
well, we had, because we've talked about this before, but just for those viewing, but we've talked about too, just like oh shoot, I lost my train of thought here. The idea that that we can talk about. I think that a lot of disagreements can sometimes come not from the identification of the problem, but from how to solve the problem. So if we look at an issue, I think that there can be a lot of actual commonality when we look at the specific issue. I think sometimes it's good to walk back and be like, okay, well, what is the problem that we're wanting to solve? And I also think that it's something that can maybe get lost. And because if you live in a community that's primarily conservative, or if you live in a community that's primarily liberal, you often aren't getting the root, what is at the heart of whatever the opposite ideology is trying to advocate for. You generally get the more extreme bits, the implications presented to. Yeah.
Like when you said, me being pretty poor, working really hard to, create some wealth, not money or cash or greed, but wealth and assets that I could bless our family with and others, and never taking that much personally myself, that I just understood the taxation model as I'm a rich guy having money taken, and then you help me because you define that as, and that could be, it could be if I'm making a couple $100,000 a year, do I need that much? But I don't. But to run a company, to put some money away, to pay for your educations, it might be. And you do get taxed, like I get. If you own property, you're going to get taxed a lot there. If you own, so sometimes you might not see it in federal income tax, but when you add it up, if you own things, you get taxed on it. But anyhow, the point was, you were saying that, there's some really ultra rich, like I look at the athletes with $1 million cars or those kind of things. And I think, the idea of just, I got to get my money is not, are the very, very rich, like you're talking about some high-tech companies and people that might get around $1 trillion, because it speaks to not only having incredible wealth, but then it's a power that just because you're a good business person doesn't mean that you're going to be benevolent and righteous with that money. And so I do see that there can be some more equitable systems to, but that helped me. That helped me to understand, because, the redistribution of goods, I've lived in a society, the kibbutz and trust rights. And so that's a discussion for another time.
Right.
But I feel real excited about us being able to explore those things, And
here, can I just hop in real quick?
Yeah.
Because I think that we have, there's complex conversations about economics and what is beneficial for the, for the collective whole, and often it can get into just a finger pointing session where it's like, well, this group is greedy and this group is just looking for handouts, and there are probably people on both ends who are there are definitely greedy people there, and on both sides, but at the heart of it, I think that a lot of the overlap of what the common everyday person is they're just wanting to be in a place where I feel like I want to be able to work and be rewarded for my work, and both Republican or liberal, that's the conversation. And so even if there's a disagreement on how that comes about, I do think it's something to be reminded of, is that the heart of it could be very consistent. And it's like when I was a Christian and remember I would feel like often Christianity was and I do think that often Christianity is misrepresented, especially Christianity in the common person, where people would be talking about, there's some Christian beliefs that are really hard for people to wrap their head around, like the Eucharist. And I mean, this is more Catholic, but are you cannibals? Are you actually eating? And it's like, this is not really what it's about for most people, and that's where it's like, it's not about cannibalism, and having those conversations are few and far between, I think. And so I specifically think with our world, very few people in a liberal academic community that I kind of surrounded with would have any idea what a prophetic Christian right-leaning minister would look like. And I feel like very few people in the world that you're around would be like a liberal, agnostic, I don't know what. I almost said Marx. I'm not Marxist, but I just
you're for a lot of social programs,
right?
probably.
Exactly.
And so that there's a difference between pure communism and then like Europe has their democratic
social programs,
social programs, and seems like a number are working, but so I think I'm really excited because I feel like there's, I just feel real tender and real warmed by the ability for us to sincerely talk about these things, because I think there's been a lot of pain created that doesn't need to be, a misunderstanding. Like you were saying, I value, I just know a lot of sincere lovers of Jesus that have given a whole lot. And I just I did a lot of study last night on Christian giving. And, and there was just unnecessary articles that said they give, but they give to their own personal causes. And it discounted it. Were really, no, they were giving to the poor. And, and they were really meaning it. And I just, well-meaning people, I mean, there's enough issues without creating more issues. And I was proud of looking at the generosity, and
Yeah.
I looked at the generosity of business people, and it was better than what I thought, but could be better,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, it, but then they identified in all of them that the more democratic perspective was to give through the government, that they pay the taxes through the government versus charitable giving, and and that's something to talk about in the future because
Sure.
I feel like it's compulsory with taxes, but when I want to put 25 to 30% away for minorities and others just to help them get started in business.
No, yeah. I think that's a really interesting conversation. And I think that, I think that and that's what's something that probably is misunderstood on both ends. And I think that we should definitely get into the specifics of that specific conversation. But I think it's really representative of what we were talking about because like I feel like I've been on both sides of where I've seen people like Kevin Casey and the Freedom Fire organization, where there's just good Christian people who are trying to do really good things and trying to care for the poor, care for the marginalized, care for the widows and orphans. I was involved with a program in Hawaii that was about adopting orphans with special needs. And there's certainly things where I think even within those organizations, there were some things that I didn't disagree, that I didn't agree with in the way that it was structured or the way that, just certain aspects of it. But at the heart of it, I'm like, these are really, really good people who are trying to do their best, who are trying to spread love. And on the opposite end, I've also now worked with different soup kitchens. I worked with a program with UMKC where we went and taught philosophy in prisons and stuff like that. And on the liberal side of it, I see some people who are just really just want to see their societies better. They want to see that, people who are poor and marginalized can have a place in society. And again, there's definitely some structural stuff that I wouldn't agree with in certain, cases. But I think we have to fight hard for seeing the good in people and seeing the good in these institutions, and especially across the aisle and across lines of faith. I think that we need to get better at looking and seeing, the beauty and worth of human beings who are different than us, I
love that. And I love just, say somebody is misguided and done some real evil. I just love John 8, where Jesus, the woman was getting stoned, and he said, don't throw a stone who has not sinned, who hasn't made a mistake. But he wrote twice in the sand, and he wrote the first time about the woman, the second time about the perpetrators, about the abusers, and he called to be noblemen. He called that, he gave them an opportunity to be better, and they all dropped their stones. And I just think there could be a higher conversation where, that people are I just want to give human beings a break. They're frail. They've been hurt and wounded, and some of them dramatically so, and they act out of that. And you can't allow, certain things to go unchecked for sure. But I just think, the idea that just the way we cut each other off and the way we just treat each other like non-humans and apathy, and I will never with our president, with any president, I'm always going to honor because unless they turn into a dictator that cruelly kills and, so I just, and I have seen enough of cultivated evil that was really like in Zimbabwe. I mean, I love Zimbabwe, but, I have 10 or 11-year-olds be axing to death our friends. And
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah.
you know, I couldn't see in their eyes a human being. It felt like they were just brought up, you know. So I don't know, but I see them as redeemable. I mean, like 7 or 8 of them, after they did it, you know, the people that lived went to them and loved them, and ended up, it was beautiful. But
well,
my point is just finish that was just that I think that, you know, there's been a number of times that I've been in the midst of where somebody's really doing something really wrong. I had one time where a man looked like a Marine, and he had a 6-year-old boy, and it was his girlfriend didn't like herself. You could tell, you know, just she was nothing wrong with being heavy, but her hair and just this sense of not liking her body, not liking, because I had more discussions, you know. But we were all there, and I don't think you guys were aware of it, but I saw him snapping his towel, and he's a good 260-pound, good bulky man, and he's walking up to the parking lot, and he's saying what he's going to do to this 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old's terrified. So I'm playing frisbee with Clay.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and I said, I just got to run to the bathroom. Why?
Yeah.
I didn't. I ran up there, and Clay, of course, followed me, and I shoved him against a car, because
I remember this. I think we were at Worlds of Fun.
I think it was at
or maybe it was
that small town that we had the farm.
In Ethel?
Yeah, Ethel. There was a lake that we all went to.
Interesting.
One time. Yeah.
Okay.
It was about 20 miles away, and so he was going to shut the kid's fingers in the trunk. I mean, he just.
What? Oh, man.
He was acting like he was gonna.
Right. Maybe he was just scaring him, but that's just evil.
But, you know, I mean, it looked like he was going to do it. So I put my forearm across the back of his neck and ducked under and threw him against the car. And he was going to fight me. And, you know, I just with my wrestling background, I know at least how to take care of, you know, wrestle somebody down, get away, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I was so angry. And, you know, I just told him, I'm going to come up one side of you, down the other. Once you tell him, apologize, and he's the greatest and you're the worst. And, you know, I mean,
right.
And he's terrified because when somebody comes back confident and catches you off guard, you don't know what they got. You think you got a knife or all that. Yeah. And I just felt like, I'd call it the presence of God, just lift. I just felt like, I felt so sad that I treated a human being like that, no matter. Yeah. And I said, you're better than this. And the conversation changed, and Clay standing a few feet behind me. And I said, we can really turn this around. Whatever's happened to make you so angry and all that. And it ended up, you know, I could tear up now, one of the best conversations. And he apologized, not because he thought I was going to beat him up or anything. He just took responsibility, talked about his life in the past, and there was a group that had formed around us. But when they left, and the woman, I've never seen anybody, the whole group wave at me with such love and affection. It was like, you believed in me, you know. And I just think that we're going to get to, you know, I met the Virginia Tech boy in McDonald's before he killed everybody. You know, he was yelling at his father, and that time it didn't work. I just tried to come over and pray or talk to him. I'm not trying to witness as much as just, you know, kind of, he just, you know, when people cross the edge and they can't come back, it feels like, you know, that's where I don't think that many are in that situation in America. I think we're still a young nation, and that we got a lot of love and a lot of good realities. And I think those are the things we can talk about, so we can keep the course hopefully going a better direction. I have a friend, just you and I talking, sincerely from the heart, is just going to give opportunity for a whole different discussion. And
For sure.
so I love you. I appreciate you. I got to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And
Sounds
part 2 soon.
sure.
Like, I think, I'd love to do more
Yeah.
than this. This has been awesome.
Yeah. I think it was a good introduction. I think we touched on a lot of points that we, could get more specific about. And I think that would be really interesting and beneficial.
And we'll have a code. Like, if you put your finger up, that means, Dad, be quiet.
Okay.
I want to say something. Because I don't know if I interrupted you and let you finish what you were.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll throw things at the camera if I need to or something like that. So.
I deeply respect you, man. I love you. And I love what you shared. It really means a lot. So, good deal. So, part 2 soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Now, can you post that? That was amazing. That was amazing, man. I mean, this has got to be just sent out everywhere.